My name is Caleb, and I have always felt that there are things lurking in the dark, watching, waiting. I do not fear them, I welcome them. My friend, Christopher, was not as lucky as I was. He was blind to the shadows until they chose to make themselves known to him. That night, everything changed. Christopher had been spending the evening with his younger sister, Emily, in their dimly lit room. The sky outside was heavy with clouds, threatening to burst into a storm at any moment. The room was quiet except for the slow, methodical notes of the piano under their fingers. Music had always calmed them, made them feel safe. How foolish they were. They had been recording themselves on Snapchat, nothing unusual. Just a simple video of them playing together. It was a way to pass the time, to capture fleeting moments. But then, the phone screen turned black. At first, Christopher assumed the app had crashed, but before he could even voice his confusion, the screen flickered back to life. What he saw next made his blood freeze. A video played, a video that had not been recorded by them. It was a recording of Christopher and Emily, sitting at the piano, but the angle was all wrong. The shot came from directly above them, a bird's-eye view of their hunched figures, fingers moving across the keys. The camera had been positioned behind them, still and unshaking. The song they had been playing, once soft and harmonious, was now twisted, played in reverse, warping into something sinister. Christopher's breath caught in his throat. He turned his head to look behind him, Emily mirroring his movement, but there was nothing. No one. There were no vents, no windows, no shelves where a phone could have been placed. The ceiling was smooth, uninterrupted. And yet, someone, or something, had been there, had recorded them from an impossible angle. Had watched them. The phone restarted on its own, the screen going black once again. When it powered back on, the video was gone, erased without a trace. Christopher spent the rest of the night wide awake, his mind racing, his skin crawling with the sensation of unseen eyes still upon him. I listened to his story with interest, but not surprise. I had always believed in the unseen. Unlike Christopher, I knew that once they set their sights on you, they never truly left. He asked me what I thought had happened, why the video had played in reverse, why there had been no way for anyone to be in that room recording them. I simply smiled. Some questions are better left unanswered. The next morning, Christopher was different. He had always been the type to brush things off, to rationalize even the strangest occurrences. But this? There was no explanation, no comforting logic to fall back on. He refused to touch his phone, left it sitting on his nightstand like some cursed object that might strike him down the moment he dared to hold it again. Emily, on the other hand, seemed less shaken. Perhaps it was denial. Perhaps she had convinced herself that it was just some elaborate glitch, a trick of the technology they didn't fully understand. She told Christopher to let it go, that they were scaring themselves over nothing. But I knew better. Christopher had called me that morning, his voice shaking as he relayed the events of the previous night. I could hear the exhaustion in his tone, the way his sentences trembled. When he finished, there was silence between us. A long, heavy pause. "Do you believe me?" he asked at last, barely a whisper. I did not hesitate. "Yes." He let out a shaky breath, as though he had been holding it, waiting for me to dismiss his fears like Emily had. But I would not. I could not. I had seen too much in my own life to doubt him. I told him to check his phone, even though I knew he did not want to. There was always the possibility that something still remained, some clue the thing had left behind. He protested, but eventually, his fear of the unknown outweighed his fear of facing it. I heard the soft rustling as he picked it up, as he swiped at the screen. Silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. "What is it?" I asked. "It's nothing." The video is gone. Like it never existed. I expected that. These things rarely left evidence behind. But I could tell from his voice that he wasn't reassured. The absence of proof did not make it any less real. That day, Christopher was a ghost of himself. He barely spoke, his eyes darting to shadows that had not been there before. I did not blame him. Once you are touched by the unknown, it does not let you go so easily. And then, that night, something happened again. Christopher called me in the dead of night, his voice hoarse with terror. He was whispering, as though afraid of being overheard. I could hear Emily in the background, her voice tight with fear. It happened again, he choked out. But this time I wasn't even awake. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? My phone. It recorded something. By itself. I did not speak, waiting for him to continue. It's me, Caleb. It's me sleeping. The camera is hovering over my bed, looking down at me. The angle, his breath hitched. The angle is from the ceiling again. There was a muffled sob from Emily, a rustling sound as though they were huddled together. The horror in Christopher's voice was thick, suffocating. I had no words of comfort to give. I knew, without a doubt, that this was only the beginning. Christopher refused to sleep after that night. He and Emily kept every light in the house on, and their parents, oblivious to their terror, assumed they were just being careless. But I knew better. I knew that once something like this started, it did not just stop. I told Christopher to get rid of his phone. Smash it. Burn it. Anything to sever the connection. He hesitated at first, reluctant to believe that such a simple action could help. But desperation is a powerful thing. That night, I listened over the phone as he went outside, as he lifted the device high above his head and threw it against the concrete driveway. A sharp crack echoed through the receiver, followed by frantic breaths. "It's broken," he said, voice unsteady. Screens shattered. "It won't turn on." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Good. Now bury it. Get rid of it." He did. I heard the rustling of dirt, the scrape of metal against rock. He buried it deep, under the old oak tree in his backyard, covering it as though he were laying something to rest. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe it was over. Then, Emily screamed. Christopher dropped the phone and ran inside, the line cutting off before I could ask what had happened. My hands trembled as I waited for him to call back, but the seconds stretched into minutes. And then, my phone buzzed. A video message. It was from Christopher's number. My breath caught in my throat as I hesitantly opened it. The video played, and my stomach twisted in horror. It was Christopher and Emily. Standing in the middle of their dimly lit living room, eyes wide with terror. The camera was positioned behind them again, still and unshaking, recording their frozen expressions as they stared at something in front of them. Something I could not see. Then, the video distorted. The screen flickered, the audio warped into an unnatural, droning hum. Their figures twisted, elongated, their faces stretching into something inhuman. And just before the video ended, just before the screen went black, they turned. And they looked directly at me. The call came a moment later. Christopher, frantic, breathless. "Caleb," his voice broke. "It's not over. It's still here." I swallowed hard, my grip tightening on my phone. I had thought I could help him. That I could end this before it went too far. I was wrong. This was only the beginning. Christopher and Emily refused to stay in their house after that night. Their parents, still unaware of the horror unfolding around them, chalked it up to childish paranoia. They thought it was nothing more than nightmares or overactive imaginations. But I knew the truth. Christopher stayed with me for the next few nights. He barely spoke, barely ate. He sat in the corner of my room, eyes hollow, staring at nothing. The phone was gone, buried, but it did not matter. The thing that had attached itself to him did not need a device to watch him. It had already made itself comfortable. Then, on the third night, I woke up to the sound of movement. Slow, deliberate footsteps crept across my room. I turned my head, expecting to see Christopher, but he was still curled in the corner, unmoving. My heart pounded as I scanned the darkness, my breath catching in my throat. The closet door was open. I knew for certain that I had closed it before going to sleep. A shape stood inside, barely visible in the dim light. Tall, motionless, its face obscured by the shadows. A feeling of absolute dread settled in my chest. I could not move. I could not breathe. The thing in my closet did not step forward, did not make a sound. It simply watched. Then, my phone vibrated on the nightstand. A message. With shaking hands, I picked it up and unlocked the screen. It was a video. I hesitated, knowing exactly what I was about to see. But some terrible curiosity, some twisted need to understand, made me press play. The footage was dark at first, nothing but grainy static. Then, it flickered into focus. The video was of me. Sleeping. The angle was from above, just like before. Just like Christopher's had been. Then, the camera moved. Slowly, deliberately, the frame shifted, tilting toward my closet door. And there, standing just inside the threshold, was the shadowy figure. The screen went black. I threw the phone across the room, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Christopher stirred, groggy and confused, but I could not speak. I could not tell him what I had just seen. Because I knew, without a doubt, that when I looked up from my bed, the closet door would be open. And something would be watching me. The next morning, Christopher was gone. His parents said he came home in the middle of the night, though he never told them why. He refused to answer my calls, my messages. It was as if he had decided to pretend none of it had ever happened. Maybe that was his way of surviving. But I knew the truth. I knew what I had seen. What I had felt. And I knew that whatever had started with Christopher had now set its sights on me. The end.